Hello there. Those desperate Tories are now clutching at straws, and this latest one will just cause us even more problems. For many, food is becoming more of a luxury item every single day. Forget CPI inflation, food price inflation is wrecking the finances and the lives of the poorest in society. The Bank of England hasn't been able to stop it, nor has the government, despite the pledge by the PM to halve inflation. And a Treasury source said, "Food inflation is much more resilient and difficult to get rid of than we anticipated." But now Rishi and his team have a plan. They're drawing up plans to introduce price caps on some of the more basic foods like bread and milk. And Number 10 says that caps will be voluntary. Now, if the base costs of these items are greater than the selling price, the supermarkets will make a loss. Either that, or they force the loss further back down the chain onto the farmer or the baker, for example. Or maybe the taxpayer will once again step into the breach to bridge the gap. And the extremely wealthy, as well as the poorest in society, can benefit from these caps. It's not a targeted programme. Now, if the farmers, food producers and retailers are expected to take a hit, then you watch other prices go up to compensate for the losses. And how about the small corner shops that can't take such a financial hit? They will be forced out of the marketplace for basic foods. We will end up relying on government and mega corporations for our food. And that will not end well. Or maybe some of them will stop growing, making or selling those loss-making foods, making them ever more scarce. Now that would be a real disaster. I mean, how long would you persevere with buying milk and bread for resale and then being forced to sell them on so cheap that you make a loss on every single item? And while all this is going on, governments of the developed world have decided to set their sights on agriculture to start scaling back to ensure less food is produced. To help save the planet. And they're targeting meat, and especially red meat. This has starvation on a mass scale written all over it. That's when they bring on the bugs and the Frankenstein foods they're developing in their gruesome food laboratories. But the very fact that the government is thinking about food price caps is an acknowledgement that food prices are going to keep rising at a significant rate well into the future. And the UK is not the only country suffering from this. France, for example, introduced voluntary food price caps back in March. Although France's market leader, E. Leclerc, did not participate, their CEO appeared to view it as a gimmick. And some consumer groups think it's just a way for the current price to be labelled as a cut price. So putting a halo round the heads of government and supermarkets. While the consumer gets gouged and the poorest get more and more into debt just so they can eat. The eco-loons went and upset a lot of people yesterday. Just Stop Oil activists invaded the pitch during the English Premiership rugby final between the Saracens and Sale, and threw their trademark orange filth everywhere. And judging by the reaction of the spectators, they were none too pleased. Except when one of the stewards rugby tackled one protester to the ground.
See why the game has to be stopped.
I know, it's going to be, no one's going to be happy with the
So the protest is continuing.
Let the boys get treatment. It'll be a scrum where Owen kicked it from.
Now, did you know that at the beginning of the 19th century, no country had a life expectancy of over 40? Since then, child mortality has dropped and life expectancy has increased to the point that it now averages 73 years of age across the planet. And that, I would argue, is down to cheap and plentiful energy. Just think where we'd be right now without it. So how come Keir Starmer is promising to block all new North Sea oil and gas developments once Labour gets into office? He claims he'll make the UK into a clean energy superpower. All he'll end up doing is further impoverishing the country while buying in all the oil and gas we will need, while he diverts workers and investment away from proven energy providers and into the erratic green energy arena. And he says he'll have a zero carbon power system by 2030. There we go again, that 2030 date cropping up yet again. All these plans built around a date and not around the reality of science. And 2030 is only 6.5 years away. The only way he can get this done is by severely limiting energy consumption by the plebs. I see a rapid rise in clean air zones and zero traffic neighbourhoods coming on. And you know something? I don't think the Tories will oppose them. So it took a whistle-blowing civil servant 3 years to get a result. Anne Thomas ended up with a ruined career after she blew the whistle on how the Department of Works and Pensions breached political impartiality rules. But it had to be done, she said. And now she has been given a £100,000 settlement by the government. That means settled by the taxpayer, by the way, not those involved in that biased activism. But the fact that there is political bias and activism within the serried ranks of the civil serpentry will come as no surprise to many of us. The civil service exists to serve the government of the day in an unbiased way, not misuse its powers to engage in what is in reality secret political activism. But as time goes on, it becomes clear that it is now infested with people of a hard left leaning. As a result, the whole of the civil service now appears to be compromised and is therefore not fit for purpose. And with the whole civil service now tainted with a left-wing bias, it makes the case for new administrations to bring their own teams of administrators with them when they're elected. At least you'd get people in the system who would work with the government of the day instead of against it, and using claims of bullying to get out of doing the work required of them.